Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time. Welcome in to the Bro Force Squad podcast, where we're just a bunch of bros drinking beer and talking movies. I am your host, the Mayor Jeff Hornacek, and this is our Broback review of the Quentin Tarantino classic, the 1994 film Pulp Fiction. Joining me for this, of course, is the Tarantino fanboy himself, Alex English. Alex, before we dive into this movie with the 5 Bro Force Squad criteria, your quick, just off the cuff thoughts on the classic Pulp Fiction.
You know, you dragged me into this review, and I was like, Pulp Fiction, huh? Quentin Tarantino, what's he done?
Yeah.
What's he done? No, but seriously, I mean, I guess it makes sense to mention it before we really get down into it. He's my favorite filmmaker, and it's my favorite movie. So I've probably seen it more than any other movie, and I'm very excited to talk about it.
Do you think that Jon Favreau, who I also love, but could not be more opposite than Quentin Tarantino, puts himself in his own movies because Quentin Tarantino does it so well and so tactfully?
More to come on that. But I actually, if you want to ask me who's the better actor, Jon Favreau is definitely the better actor, because he's actually an actor who became a director. Tarantino's just like, wait, I can do this now?
Tarantino to me will always be the creepy fucking weirdo in Dusk Till Dawn. No matter how big he gets.
He's the guy who literally worked at a video store that you would go in and you'd ask for one recommendation, be like, let me take you over here. And also, like, I don't care about this cinema. What is this?
And then he'd be like, I wouldn't buy those red vines. They're expired. Plus, they're red vines, so put them back. All right, the 5 Bro Force Squad criteria that we do all of our movie reviews on are the acting and the cast, the story, our favorite scene, any lasting impact, and then the rewatchability of the movie. So, Alex, for the cast, there's some heavy hitters in here. We get a varying array of performances. So let's just go through them one by one for the main guys. And according to IMDb's order, we start with Uma Thurman as Mia Wallace, who, I mean, hashtag not my poison ivy, but she's obviously great in this role.
If you go to IMDb right now and you pull up Pulp Fiction, the poster that's attached to this movie, I own it. It's framed and it's up on a wall.
It's I don't think I'm overstating things. I know the word iconic does get thrown around a lot, but this is an iconic movie poster also.
Yeah, it has to be. And if you want to say like, oh, wow, you're so creative, Alex, you have the Pulp Fiction poster. Hey, fuck you, bro, okay? I like the movie. It's a great poster. And
we'll fight you.
Yeah, right now. Bare knuckle. Let's go.
I've fought people for way less.
Yeah.
My issue with Uma Thurman when I don't like her is I feel like she tries to go over the top to be like really sexy with the way she delivers a lot of her lines. But I think the great thing about Mia in this movie is her and Vincent Vega, they have a really weird dynamic in their one scene. It's like they both know that the situation is set up for them to fail. Like them going out at this night, and they're both so fucked up the whole time that obviously their inhibitions are gone. And so us as the audience is almost like, well, this is only going to end one way. And then when it doesn't, as Tarantino always does, we're kind of like, oh, that was cool. You sort of subverted that character interaction.
Yeah, we're stepping on best scene here, but she snorts cocaine before they leave for their restaurant. He does heroin. So, you know, they're in good shape. Not only does he do heroin, but when he shows up to her place, he then also proceeds to drink what looks like just whiskey on the rocks. So he's got a little bit of heroin in his bloodstream, and then he also has a little bit of whiskey in his bloodstream, and she's coked up. Now let's begin the scene.
To these characters, though, I can imagine drinking like half a tumbler of whiskey is like breathing. It has like, if anything, it probably sobers them up. That's a scary place to be.
That's a good point. He's like, I'm on heroin. Let me drink a little bit of whiskey. That's my water.
Yeah, well, before you drive, have 2 shots of whiskey, just so you're safe. So I know you get home all right. All right, John. Let's move on. John Travolta as Vincent Vega. I'll let you go first.
I mean, you know, it's been discussed. Everybody knows this, but basically, John Travolta's career was like dead. And Tarantino likes to reinvent careers, and he cast him as Vincent Vega an iconic role, just from the incredibly bad wig, which that's a theme throughout the movie. If you look at Uma Thurman's wig as well as Sam Jackson's wig, they just completely ridiculous, and that kind of adds to the dark humor of the film overall. But he does not miss a beat. I honestly, I've seen this movie probably close to 30 times, and every time when they're at the restaurant sitting in the booth, I'm like, he is high though, right? Like he is on drugs. He's like, that's a pretty good fucking milkshake, and his eyes like kind of roll over, and he's like bumbling his word. It's so good. I don't know how.
Also, it was a different time when he balked at a $5 milkshake. I was like, it's a pretty good fucking deal.
Yeah, I'm like, there's no bourbon in it or nothing. Like, listen, it's fine. But in 1994, that would have been absurd. I mean, you can get a good milkshake now for $1.99. So a $5 milkshake in 1994 is the equivalent to like a $15 milkshake now. I would be upset at that.
You'd have to pull out the pink slip to your car to like buy that in 94. So I'll say this about John Travolta, and I don't have many negatives about this movie, but Tarantino has to literally beat the charisma out of him in this role with his dialogue, because Travolta is, I'll just take what you said one step further. His career was dead. And I think John Travolta, while I'm sure a great guy, like, acting in a Tarantino movie, he is just, the dialogue is dragging his dead carcass through this thing, because his character is written so well that despite really like any affable personality traits he can exhibit, Tarantino somehow gets them out of him. And he does the same with Butch as Bruce Willis, because the dialogue's so fucking good. Before
we transition to Bruce Willis, like he gave him the star of Saturday Night Fever the opportunity to step on a stage and dance. I mean, it's iconic, right? Like,
and then he classically pulled the reins on him and made him dance like an idiot, which is even better, because you're thinking like, are they gonna have like some big dance number? And
nah, they're just doing the twist in an amateur way. But Tarantino's camera is like, let me make this, widescreen 16:9, widescreen ratio, and all of a sudden you look like you're movie star again, and then he became a movie star again. Yeah. It's incredible. But transitioning to Bruce Willis, like, so he was what, 2, maybe 3 years removed from Die Hard 2?
Yeah, this was probably like, if you looked at the cast at the time, I bet as far as like paychecks, he probably commanded the highest salary at this time.
You would think, right? He has to have, because Die Hard 1 and 2 were like, they basically reinvented Hollywood.
Because I think Travolta was sort of more like a bargain basement price here, and obviously Samuel L. Jackson and Uma Thurman still kind of up and comers in '94.
Right.
Although, when did the Die Hard come out that Samuel L. Jackson was in with Bruce Willis? Had that happened already? Even though I don't think they share a scene.
I think this was just after. Yeah, I think it was maybe a year or two after. And if there's any fact checkers out there, like, don't fact check.
You're listening to the wrong podcast.
Yeah, I don't. Listen, I'm several alcoholic beverages in, so that's not what this is about. But yeah, Butch, I mean, Bruce Willis, he's and he's in such great shape too. He gets to like flaunt it.
This role is written great for him because Bruce Willis has made a whole career out of looking like he's too cool to actually be in the movie that he's in, or that he thinks he is. And the way Butch's character plays is just the complete stoic, what the fuck ever. Like, I'm doing my own thing despite all this craziness around me. And it kind of works here. And again, I hate to like act like Tarantino is the one that doesn't have a single wart on him. But the way he writes these characters, like, I don't know how Bruce Willis could have fucked this performance up. Like,
he's, in my opinion, he's the most well-rounded character in the movie, right? You get to see his tough side. You get to see his soft side. You get to see his side where he's like literally sitting there battling his conscience, right? And again, I don't want to step on best scene, but when he's leaving the pawn shop, he's about to leave, and then he's like, I can't leave knowing that guy is back there getting raped. And he's such a well-rounded character in such a short amount of... I mean, he's got enough screen time, but I think this is one of those movies where I don't think there is a lead... You couldn't have a lead actor for this movie. Yeah. It's a bunch of incredible secondary roles. And and to manage to have obviously an actor like Bruce Willis is a phenomenal actor, be so well rounded and just like basically what 2 set pieces really?
Yeah, like
it's incredible. Like it's a testament to the writing. I mean, I don't want to say it a lot during this podcast, but Tarantino, in terms of his dialogue, is a genius in my opinion, and the way he's able to write these characters is so. He has like a certain type of beat and a certain type of actor that he looks for when and I have a whole list of actors that I'm like, how has he not been in a Tarantino movie yet? He would be incredible, and hopefully before he's done, he'll get to have them.
One quick thing, we might talk about this in Best Scene, but when Butch is about to leave, then he decides he wants to save Marcellus from being raped. The cerebral nature that he films the scene, like, yeah, but what weapon will I kill these guys with? And he sort of picks up. At a certain point, I thought he was going to put like a fucking mixtape in one of the boom boxes.
So
like,
I have this this is a crazy opinion, but I literally think that like that scene is what inspired Rockstar Games to create GTA. Because think about it. He's literally there. He's like, huh?
And he's got like the bouncing around that your character.
Right. You're like trying to pick up the weapon, and then he's like this. Like he picks up a baseball bat, and then he picks up a chainsaw, and then he finally picks up the samurai sword. And all 3 of those weapons are literally in Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
And
like,
why would you pick? I mean, the chainsaw is like, we're not animals. I mean, Jesus.
Right. Well, and I think that's a nod to, again, my Tarantino geek is going to come out a good bit during this podcast, but it's a nod to just his complete infatuation with Asian cinema.
Yes.
The dude is like a absolute psychopath for just all kung fu movies.
I heard him you might have heard the same thing too, on a podcast this past week, talk about kung fu movies for literally 2 hours. Literally 2 hours. He's
like he's an encyclopedia. The people who made those movies are like, huh? I didn't know that about my movie.
I didn't even know he knew. All right, last, I think one of the main ones, and then if you have any honorable mentions, but obviously Samuel L. Jackson is Jules. And I think it's hard to remember now because he's played at some iteration of this person so many times, but this like started what Samuel L. Jackson is so great at in movies, which is, I did it right off the top, the loudmouth who will throw fuck into a children's movie if he has to get his point across. And it's crazy, like, you can put dialogue on the page, and Samuel Jackson, well, some people might say he's like one note, but he has a screen presence that, whether you like him or not, it's irrefutable. Like, when he talks on screen, whether it's in something like this, or The Hateful Eight, where he just literally gives soliloquy after soliloquy, or The Avengers, you listen and you're fixated on him when he's on camera.
Absolutely. And I was going to save this for, I have a section that's just called random notes that isn't part of any category that I just wanted to touch on. I'll go ahead and just bring it up now. Him not winning Best Supporting Actor that year at the Oscars is the greatest travesty in the history of the Academy Awards.
Do you know who won that year? Not to put you on the spot.
I do. I happened to save it because I knew it was going to come up. Martin Landau for Ed Wood. How many conversations have you had about that in the last 26 years?
Martin Landau's at home like, is bullshit. Shouldn't have won.
Now, I'm looking at that same year, we also had Gary Sinise as the Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, which, okay, fine. But come on, this is an iconic.
I would argue that's not even Gary Sinise's best supporting actor with Tom Hanks in that 4-year stretch. I think Apollo 13 tops that.
And this is why you host the podcast. Well done. But yeah, I mean, going back to Samuel Jackson, I vividly remember watching this movie for the first time and just being like, what is this character? And I didn't know that this was something that was possible. Full disclosure, I was probably way too young when I saw this movie for the first time.
But if you remember one character from the movie, it's probably him. Like, his screen presence is...
Yeah, I would say he's the most maybe iconic and unique character. The fact that he's rocking a Jerry curl, too, is incredible, considering it was the mid-90s. And that was very much a thing of, like, the 70s and maybe early 80s. And
he's like,
Tarantino's like, nah, he's going to rock a Jerry curl. That's fine. And it's completely like unironic too. Like all of their hairstyles are complete. Travolta, same thing. Uma Thurman, the same thing. Um, but you said that I have any honorable mentions. I do. So I wanted to mention the fact that before Uma Thurman, who again we've mentioned is the person that's prime and she's front and center on the poster of this movie, the iconic poster. Before she's even on screen, we see Tim Roth, who of course a phenomenal British actor.
Who you're wondering, like, you almost forget he's in it because he's just bookends the movie. You're like,
he bookends the movie, right? And of course he was he was in Reservoir Dogs and was like probably the main character of that movie, right? Which was Tarantino's first movie. So you see Tim Roth, you see Travolta, you see Sam Jackson.
Is walk-in scene before her?
No, you see Bruce Willis and you see Ving Rhames. You see all those guys before she even shows up. And like, so imagine being a person who back in 1994, you're at the mall, right? You're still seeing movie posters on the wall. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, wow, Uma Thurman, yeah, what? She's an up and coming actress, like, and you go in to see this movie, and you're like 45 minutes in, Uma Thurman's like not even on screen yet. The flex, I mean, just the flex is incredible.
Yeah,
the confidence.
I want to give a quick honorable mention to Eric Stoltz, who plays Lance, the drug dealer.
Yes,
who shot half of Back to the Future as Marty McFly and then got cut. I'm sorry, Eric.
It's one of the greatest what ifs of all time. But I think it ended up, for the best. But he has, I think, probably a top 3 hilarious line in this movie. And we don't have to step on again best scene, but he's
during the adrenaline shot scene.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Also,
I also wanted to mention,
Well, I was going to say Steve Buscemi as Buddy Holly, their waiter.
Right, who of course was, one of the main characters in Reservoir Dogs. Harvey Keitel, just incredible.
Awesome.
Just
call me Winston. God, we're friends.
The most like flex to me, the thing that stands out most of his entire performance is when he takes that sip of coffee. And he turns around to Jimmy, which is Tarantino's character, and he's just like, Nothing makes me want to have coffee more than that scene. Every time
Tarantino, after getting 3 compliments, he's so fucking proud of that coffee. He's like, I shopped for this. My wife likes dog shit.
And then just obviously Ving Rhames is incredible. And hilarious Kathy Griffin random appearance.
On IMDb, it says she plays Kathy Griffin, which I'm just like, I guess she could.
She happened to be walking in Hollywood and being like, I'm a stand-up comic.
Tarantino's like, refute it.
Christ. Right. And then, of course, Tarantino. I'm one of the people, I love Tarantino. I don't think he's a good actor at all. I just don't.
He does either, though, to be fair.
And I don't think he's like very good in Reservoir Dogs. I don't think he's very good in Hateful Eight. I think he's fine in this movie. Yeah. I think his character in this movie, and we can bring it up now, or actually let's bring it up now. What do you think his profession is? So all we know is that he's like a friend of the mob in some way. I was thinking like maybe lawyer, maybe accountant of some sort, like he does their finances, or maybe has gotten a few of their guys out of. But he's at home at like 9 a.m. on a Thursday.
Right. So, it's assumedly a work day because his wife Bonnie is at work.
Right. The Bonnie situation.
I don't know. I was getting a real like Danny McBride and Pineapple Express vibe from him. Like I'm in a kimono 12 hours a day, but I'm still not fucking relaxed ever.
I gotta say, Mr. Winston, these are our best linens.
My uncle gave this to me for our wedding, and he's like, I don't give a shit about that, to be honest.
And that's another thing. Like, I think those lines are like very well delivered. Like, in my opinion, the fact that this was done in 1994 and he's not better now as an actor speaks to his ability as an actor. But I think he's actually kind of funny in this movie.
I do too.
That's all I have to say about cast. It's an incredible top to bottom. I mean, this guy was coming off of Reservoir Dogs, and by this point, everybody in Hollywood was like, "Oh, he's just this kid who happens to be a genius." So yeah, I want to be in this movie. Great.
And the foresight, like most of the cast members in this, ended up having great careers. So if you're whoever the casting director was, if you're casting on a budget, I mean, kudos because you hit pretty much everybody that
They were. This was part of like the big explosion of like the independent film boom, and it was. I mean, I think it kind of put it into the mainstream, really.
Yeah. All right, our next topic is the story. Now, as far as the actual narrative, I think the beauty of this and most Tarantino films, I would say with the exception of probably Django and Inglourious Bastards, is that it's a very simple, bare bones narrative, but his dialogue is so strong that it just captivates you and pushes you through the movie. So I think the main thing about the story here, Alex, and we can maybe even talk about this more in Impact, but what he does with chopping up the narrative and telling it in a completely non-linear way, which you don't even realize until I'm trying to think what scene it is. Is it maybe not even until the diner scene at the end when you realize?
Yeah, it actually throws you off. So if you watch the movie as it's obviously presented, you see Travolta's character getting shot up by Butch. At that point, if you're in the movie theater, right? If you're like an audience who's just you're still like, oh shit, Travolta just died without even having a line. And you don't really like understand that like the outfit is wearing and like kind of what is happening. It doesn't really like make a lot of sense because you haven't really been given a chance to figure that out. And then all of a sudden, like now there's the Bonnie situation, which is the last chapter, and oh, there's Travolta again, and you're like, hold on, what the fuck? What just happened? And it's
But
like,
I believe it starts with the guy in the bathroom at the apartment. So you're kind of like, oh, okay, we're winding it back to the Phil
right.
Lamar.
Yeah, it's I mean it's it's 2020 and by now this has been played out so much. And Tarantino was not the first one to do this. This had been done in the history of cinema.
Sure.
But he did it in such a way where I love one thing that I think is underrated about this movie is that before the movie starts, and it's kind of cheesy because it's like, what's the number one thing that people do who are like, oh, I have to public speak for the first time and I don't know what to say? They look up like a dictionary definition.
Right.
They're like, the definition of leadership is, and you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is going to be the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. But he puts that up front because,
but
like,
how many people at home right now are going back to their PowerPoint for work on Monday? Like, well, I'll delete the first slide. Synergy, the definition.
Like, he basically is like, listen, the name of this movie is Pulp Fiction. The definition of pulp is a mass, a matter that has sort of an overall mass. It doesn't mean anything. It's nothing. And I think the story of this movie is not, it's the fact that he doesn't have to present it in chronological order is what makes it pulp, right? He's just like, hey, here's this little thing. Here's this little thing. Here's this little thing. I'm just going to kind of edit them in a weird way, but I guarantee you're going to enjoy every single aspect of it because it's all going to be entertaining in its own way. And when you put it all together, it creates this fun little pulpy mass. And that, I mean, it's a perfect title for the movie, right? It literally is what it's called what the movie is.
I was going to say the title in and of itself is this weird combination of like very literal and also very meta. It's just basically telling you like, I'm telling you a made up story, which is basically what, I mean, most movies are, even like biopics to some extent.
How many like frustrated Seattle grunge bands were like, God damn it, that was our band name. Fuck. Because, I mean, come on.
We got to change it, Xander, because that's obviously his name is Xander.
Pulp Fiction is like an incredible band name that just,
How many bassists named Christian who lived in Auburn, Washington, smashed their guitar when they saw that fucking title? God damn it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll say the only thing that I can really add to that about the story is that I think it's really interesting how he's able to. There are all these narratives that, like, there really is not like a culmination to these narratives. And I think the great thing about this is, so MacGuffins in movies are this superfluous thing that characters are chasing throughout the movie, right? And the briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
You mean the entire Avengers saga? Go on.
Correct. Yeah. No, exactly though. It's a
It's fine.
plot.
It made $17 billion. I think it works as a story device.
It's a plot device that like has been like it's some screenwriters will view it as a crutch, but it is kind of a necessity in a lot of especially genre films. But what Pulp Fiction does is the MacGuffin, which is the briefcase. Like I guess it's important, but it's really not. It's really the most insignificant thing at all. Like if you were to ask me what he thinks in the briefcase, I'd be like, dude, that is my 11th question of anything else.
It doesn't matter.
And that's the beauty of it.
At all.
Because when Samuel Jackson is holding it up and Tim Roth is marveling at it, I'm like, I could give two fucks what's in this case. I want to see you guys talk some more.
That's what I think that's one of the things that really just blows my mind about the process of writing the script. So obviously Tarantino knew this, right? He's like, I have to have two of my five, I think it's 5 chapters, have to have this thing show up, right? It's the last
push the plot a little bit.
Yeah, it's basically the last chapter and the first chapter. And I'm not going to show what's in there, but for some reason it has to be important because that's what drives the characters. And because his writing is so rich and so good and the characters seem so like lived in, it actually doesn't matter at all. Like there's all these, if you go on the internet and you're like, what's
I was going to say,
Pulp Fiction briefcase?
Has he ever said
horseshit? It doesn't matter.
Has he ever said in an interview what he perceives to be in it? Good, because I don't want to know.
Because it doesn't matter. Like, and I say no very confidently. Like, I don't know that for a fact, but I'm such a fanboy that I kind of feel like I would know if he had.
If he were sitting there with you, he'd be like, "Fuck no, why would I do that?"
Yeah, because it doesn't matter. Like, right? He's able to literally write two 20-minute scenes around a briefcase that has nothing in it. You don't know what's in it, and it doesn't matter. And that's kind of the genius behind the whole MacGuffin part of it, is that he doesn't have to say. All he has to do is have Tim Roth go, is that what I think it is?
Let's just settle on this. It's a holographic Zapdos card.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Like, who will argue that?
Yeah.
That would be cool. Okay.
From a common sense perspective, I would guess it would be I don't know, gold blocks.
A gold brick. That's what I assume.
It doesn't matter.
But
what would the character say? Is that what I think it is? The gold bricks. Gold bricks are just a different way of showing dollar bills. It's not impressive in one way or another.
It's the Triforce from Zelda.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I love that Sam Jackson's character is just like, it's my boss's dirty laundry. Your boss makes you do his dirty laundry? Yeah, when he needs me to. That sounds like a shitty job. Yeah, well. And it's like, it just doesn't matter. And it's, to me, like, I try to put myself in the position of a person writing a story, and you can write a story without defining like a clear thing that actually moves the story forward. It's phenomenal. It's very good.
Yeah. All right, on to best scene. Alex, I know this is like picking which of your children is the favorite. That's the one who's good at sports. But for me, I'm just going to go with basically a glorified cameo. There are so many great scenes in this, so many great extended versions of dialogue. But the one that stood out to me, and the one that I always just love picturing Tarantino talking to the actor about casting him in this, it's got to be Christopher Walken giving a young Butch basically the chronological history of all the assholes, literally, that the watch he's giving him has been in. Now, how do you think he pitched that to Christopher Walken? So, Quentin, what's the scene? It's like, all right, well, you come in, and the watch, you tell him everyone whose butthole it's been in.
I don't. Your Walken
it's such a slow build. It's such a slow build.
Your Walken impression is quite good. I'm gonna try to do my Tarantino impression real quick, which is basically just like a spaz on coke, right? Okay, so Chris, so like, here's what's gonna happen. So you're gonna come into the room and you're gonna be talking to this child. There's gonna be a mom there, and then
yes,
I want you to really like picture like, remember when you were in do you remember when you're in that movie about Russian roulette? What was that called? Oh, Deer Hunter, right?
Yeah,
so you're gonna be that guy.
You're
gonna be the Deer Hunter guy, and I really want you to go in there, and I really want you to really, really think about your Deer Hunter character. But imagine your Deer Hunter character had a watch up his ass the whole time.
Watch up my ass, yes.
And then I really want you to really try to sell the watch up your ass to your kid.
My ass,
he needs to really. Now I want you to know that this is this entire character arc is going to depend on you selling the watch up your ass. Can you do that for me, Christopher?
Yeah, it's up my butt. I got Quentin. What you're saying is my life. I'm good.
That's fantastic. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's go to action.
That's perfect. I think what we just did is exactly how we
found. Were we just time traveling back to 1993?
Honestly, Alex, I blacked out. I don't know what happened the last minute. But the reason I love that scene so much is it seems so insignificant at the time, and which would be so Tarantino to just put something in there because it's hilarious and it's Christopher Walken. But at the time, you don't even know it's young Butch. And actually, I believe at the time, we haven't even seen Butch for like 30 minutes in the movie.
Right.
So then when Butch and Fabian, when he has to go back for the watch, I'm like, oh my God, dude. Yes, everything is by design. And I respect that from a filmmaker. So that's why that was my scene. It works on a couple levels. Is why I liked it so much.
The only scene that we've seen Butch in is when he's like at the bar talking to Marcellus about taking, like basically losing the fight on purpose. And you're like, oh, yeah, I guess this is just some boxer. He's just going to go ahead, the fix is in, and that's cool. And then the fact that scene is in there allows you to like his character it's no long, it's like a 5-minute monologue. And it expands his character so much that as soon as that I don't know if you realize, as soon as that monologue is done, you hear the bell ring of the boxing match like finishing. Mm-hmm. It's like he literally stops talking and then it goes ding, and then you hear the radio announcer saying like, I'd never seen a boxer get out of the ring that fast before in my life, and then you show Bruce Willis's character like jumping out of a window, like literally trying to escape because he knows what he's done. The announcers are like, oh my God, he killed the guy and that's why he's leaving so fast.
By the way,
like, he's leaving so fast because he's like, I just double-crossed the mob, so I'm going to get murdered.
Horniest cab driver I've ever seen too.
Oh my God. I had to look her up because I was like, first of all, her accent is incredible.
Yes.
She's actually born in Pennsylvania, which like really really disappointed me. That I was like, actually really impressive because that's a really good accent. You really sold me.
I was getting, maybe this was just because of the color palette, but when she's driving him in the cab, and it's almost like intentionally bad plates behind the cityscape.
It's horrible.
But were you not getting like
that's where like they saved on the budget. They were like, it doesn't matter, whatever.
But were you not getting like a Sin City vibe kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
And wasn't Tarantino like an advisor on the first Sin City?
Him and Robert Rodriguez have had a lot of overlap.
They're butt buddies. They're basically like, I don't know if that's politically correct to say in 2020, but sue me. I don't give a fuck.
Best scene. What do you got?
You're gonna make me pick one?
You can do one and like an honorable mention or two. You know.
All right.
That's the hard part here. That's where we have to make the hard decisions.
So I'm gonna do one. I mean, if I had 4 down, but I'm gonna mention just 2 of them. I'm gonna mention the one that I really like when I have to sit back. I think it's my favorite, and then I'm gonna mention an honorable mention. So I think the whole scene that ends up with Mia ODing.
So Jackrabbit Slims to
yes, he picks her up. He's already on heroin. She's getting coked up. They get in the car. They go to Jackrabbit Slims. He's like, "What the fuck is this place? Can we just go get a steak?" And she's like, "Oh, you can get a steak here. It's all good. Don't be a square." And I love that they like draw a rectangle on the screen, which is like, that's not a square. It's a rectangle. Hello, geometry, bros. Come on now.
She should. Maybe she meant don't be a rhombus. Maybe that's what she was implying.
I think that whole scene, like, something about it is, Tarantino being like a very, obviously, a psychopath when it comes to the history of movies. There's like a romanticism to that whole scene. Like, it feels very old Hollywood, but it feels very old Hollywood. And by the time the scene is over, you're like, what the fuck is happening?
What a weird, he puts the audience in such a weird place. Like, let's talk stakes real quick. So obviously Marcellus is married to Mia. Her and Vincent, nothing should happen. Why are we kind of rooting for them in that scene?
Yes, it's not okay.
Like, am I fucked up in the head? What's wrong with me?
And that's the great thing about it. Obviously, so the whole scene, just the way it develops with the iconic, I would say, the most iconic scene in this movie it's not by far the most iconic like mise en scène in the movie is them dancing on the, doing the twist. That's what everybody kind of thinks of. I feel like if you've seen this movie a bunch
And
of
again,
times.
subverting expectations. Like one of the biggest dancers in Hollywood at the time,
Right.
Travolta, and he makes him like a marionette, basically.
Right,
Fucking
right.
dance.
And just the whole thing is so great. Like when they show up to the restaurant and they're like, oh, you have the car over there. And then the way the music kind of interplays with the scene, and all of a sudden Travolta like loses track of where Mia is because he's obviously fucked up, right? And he's just kind of walking around the restaurant and he's like kind of taking it in, and and all of a sudden like Mia yells at him and he's like, hey, and he's like, oh yeah, that's where you're at, because and we've all been there where we've been like way too intoxicated and you're out with your buddies and all of a sudden you're like, where am I? And they have to like yell at you and then you kind of find them. Like it's such the way the camera moves in that scene, and it kind of like allows you to fully get a sense for the setting while also giving you a sense for how kind of out of it Travolta's character is. It's really good.
And you know what's crazy, and this is a testament to Tarantino, because I've watched hour 20-minute movies where I'm like, fuck, dude, pick it up. I think that scene is like 21 minutes. It feels like 4 minutes.
And at no point are you like, okay, come on, because every word they say is incredible, right? So speed it up a little bit, like, they sit down. The whole conversation about the milkshake is phenomenal. The whole Buddy Holly.
Which, by the way, if you order a vanilla milkshake, psychopath.
I mean,
yeah. Chocolate or strawberry, bro? Like, that's the.
But I do love that. That's one thing that, like, obviously Buscemi comes and he's like the worst waiter of all time. They just sat down and he's like, "What are you having?" I'm like, "Can I get a?"
We'll take menus, bro. How about that?
Can I get a minute?
Yeah.
And then that's what's funny. Later on in the scene, Travolta's like, "I don't think he's much of a waiter." Like, I love that. That's kind of because obviously that's a nod. Like, nobody's been to a restaurant and within a minute somebody's like, "What are you having?" It's just one of those movie things. But then obviously, like, the way the scene transitions, like, they go back, and it's more of a chapter than a scene, but they go back to, they have a great time. They win the trophy for best dance. They go back to the house, and like she.
Sorry, real quick to interrupt. Do they cut after the dance scene? Do they cut to someone else before they return to the apartment, or is it just straight?
No, it's a straight edit to them basically like stumbling drunkenly
with the trophy.
Yeah, with the trophy. And they're like kind of doing like a little dance as they're walking down the alleyway. So you're like, oh, clearly they're buzzed. This is good, but also bad for John Travolta's character because he should not be doing this with the boss's wife. But also he's like drunk enough to where he doesn't care. And she's drunk enough to where she's never cared because in earlier scenes, they're like, have you met Mia? Like, she's, you sure you want to do this?
Right.
They get into the house, and then I think it's one of the best use of like music ever. She plays "Girl, You've Been a Woman Soon" while he's like in the bathroom taking a piss, talking to himself. And that song, it's a version of that. Obviously, that song has been covered by a lot of artists, but it's a version of that song that's really hyped and fast. And it kind of gets you like energized again. You're like, oh yeah, let's go. Let's see what's going to happen in the scene. Are they going to bang? Because you really think at that point, you're like, oh my God, this song is kind of sexual. Like,
yes. It's like an anti-drug PSA at this point. It's like, oh.
And I remember watching it the first time being very confused. I was like, what? I was smart enough to know, like, you can't really OD snorting a line of cocaine. Like, it's a line of cocaine. She's fine. And I was so confused. And then upon watching it several, maybe the second or third time as I got older, I was like, Oh, she snorted heroin. That's the drug that you melt in a spoon and inject in your bloodstream. Probably not the best to snort that. So when I this is and obviously that's something I picked up on when I was like really young. But this movie, I feel like every time I rewatch it, I pick up a little background something. I feel like I get something new out of it every single time, and that's why I think it's an incredible rewatch. But that's I'm going too far. That's my favorite scene. Obviously, they go back, they stab her in the heart. The sound that the needle makes against her chest. Oh,
Him like doing the little circle with the dry erase marker of where to stab, and the circle's like basically an inch in circumference. I'm like, bro, that's whatever. Just fucking stab her.
An incredible quote by Eric Stoltz, who's the dealer. He's like, when I bring an ODing bitch to your house, I'll stab her in the heart. He like basically tells
these are the rules.
These are the rules. So that's my favorite scene. I just think start to finish, those two actors, like their chemistry, it's incredible. But I wanted to, and I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but in terms of just an honorable mention, just the whole foot massage setup at the beginning. It's just so good. It's so good.
The best part about all of it is it turns out to not even be. I mean, if you would believe me,
it doesn't matter at all.
Right. No, it doesn't at all. And that's the thing with Tarantino is it's at that point, like you mentioned flexing earlier, it's almost like, dude, I can write dialogue and fucking run circles around basically any other screenplay writer. Watch this. This will be the most insignificant piece of the movie, and I dare an editor to cut this out.
Right. And like just when Sam Jackson is just like,
I love that. God damn it, I forgot how good that was.
Foot massage and sticking your tongue in the holiest of holies is not even in the same fucking ballpark. It's not even the same sport.
He's like I'm not saying that.
Travolta's like, would you give your mother a foot massage? And he's like, fuck you. It's incredible. It's just, it's so good. I like that scene. Just, and there's also like I think like a 2.5 minute continuous take, which is again Tarantino's directing his second movie. And he's like, yeah, I can do a 2.5 minute continuous take. Like, what? Is this a big deal or something? Do people not do this in movies? It's phenomenal. That would be my honorable mention.
All right, on to Impact. I got a couple rapid fire questions for you. First off, do we think Mia has a drug problem?
Listen, short answer, yes. Long answer, definitely yes.
Definitely yes, right? Okay, I just had to ask. I had to bounce that off you. Okay, another one that I had. This is one that I don't even have an answer to. I just really want to hear your answer. How much different would this movie be, both like historically or like it's the legend that has preceded it or its reputation, and then also just as a watch, if it was told just straight up chronologically?
I don't think it would be as good of a movie. I think it would still be a cult classic though. And I'll tell you why. And I wanted to bring this up earlier and I'm glad I didn't. I think in my notes for the story category, I had the following thing written down. Is it the story of Butch? And if you think about it, it kind of is.
It probably is. Like if you're asking whose character arc has progressed the most from start to finish of this film, it's definitely Butch.
And if you're counting who the audience who's paying to see movies wants to see in a movie theater at that time the most succeed, it's Bruce Willis, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at the movie chronologically, the very last scene in the movie is Butch and Fabienne, his annoying French girlfriend. She could be Belgian. I don't know. Whatever. They're driving off on a chopper into the sunset. Right? That's the last scene of the movie. He's won. So yeah. I think the movie itself is still an incredible movie. You can find all kinds of weird edits and cuts of this movie on the internet. I just don't think it's as interesting because I don't think Tarantino switched the timeline just for the sake of doing it. I honestly think he was like, when he set out to write this script, I think his idea was, I just want to write a story about shit happening in LA that's kind of vaguely interconnected.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called Pulp Fiction. And that's why it's great, right? Because here's chapter one, his movies that have come after, all of his movies are now split in chapters. Like it's definitely had a huge influence on him. Like if Tarantino says he's gonna direct 10 movies and then he's gonna stop, so technically he has one left, and if he does that, I'm gonna cry. But
And please don't be a Star Trek movie.
I know that's been a
because
rumor.
that's been heavily rumored.
But if he would do one more movie and that movie wouldn't be split into chapters, chronologically or not, I would be like, huh? Because it's kind of his thing now. A lot of filmmakers just don't do that anymore. It's just not a thing. But he's like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, and fuck you. Like, my movie can be like a book, and a script is kind of like a book, and that's how I'm gonna split it. And if you're not cool with it, then I don't care.
I feel like he wrote the screenplay for Pulp Fiction, and then almost like in the middle of the night, it came to him in a dream, like, just don't tell it in linear fashion. Chop it up. I'm not sure if he knew, and I have nothing to base it on. So good.
I mean, it could be. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let's say this one we already talked about quite a little bit, but the briefcase is like a legendary MacGuffin, almost like the OG, where it was like a little bit self-aware as a MacGuffin. So. Right. We did discuss this, but why do you think it works that we don't know what it is? And honestly, when the movie ends, like we were saying, I don't even care what it is. Like, it's not like you don't leave the theater like, oh, fuck, man, why did they tell us what was in the briefcase? You know what I'm saying?
Is it stupid to just? Honestly, it's because it shines. Is that dumb to say?
No, I think that in a weird way that makes sense. It's almost like it's like a superfluous thing. It's like it's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be something tangible.
I think they shot the scene without the light, and they were like, not impactful enough. And they're like, let's just add a bulb in there, see what happens. And then all of a sudden, like a golden bulb shines on Travolta's face and Tim Roth's face, and they're like, yeah, now it's like it's interesting enough. It adds a layer of mysticism and weirdness that it doesn't matter. And I honestly think that's what it is. And I think that's the genius to it, is that it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's in the briefcase, because it doesn't really matter to the story of the movie and the characters and what they go through. It doesn't matter at all. It's just like a thing that's in there. The briefcase could be anything else. It doesn't matter at all to me.
That's the strength of the story. By the time we get to the part where we realize it's like a value, I've already been so satisfied with the characters, the dialogue, and the arc, especially of like Butch, that I'm like, dude, this is just like the cherry on top of the sundae. Like I'm already stuffed and gorged and like rubbing my belly. It is.
I have a few notes for you that I wrote down when I was rewatching it again. So under impact, one of my notes was the gimp. I mean,
I don't get it. I'm not going to say I'm uninformed, but I'm definitely not the expert on bondage sex. I don't get his role. He seemed enthusiastic. I'll say that. He seemed like
he was into it.
He seemed like a Greg Ostertag of the underground leather sex world. He'll take a charge.
The fact that you brought up a basketball, I was going to say he seemed like the guy coming off the bench in like a blowout that he was definitely going to make like 4 or 5 threes and help out your fantasy team.
Or he's going to hit like a three while his team's up 31 points and celebrate way more than you should, given the situation. Yeah. The Darius Miles tap the head, or they do this one now. It's like, dude, you're fucking up 30. Like, quit stomping on their corpse.
Or down 30, same thing, right?
That was the gimp. But what a horrible life he must live.
Yeah, to me, so that's one of the most fascinating things about this movie. It's like, okay, those dudes, Zed and what's the other guy's name? It's like,
I don't remember the pawn shop guy's name.
Yeah, it's like Gaylord or something ridiculous like that. It's not a good name. Like, you hear his name, like, oh, that guy is definitely a pawn shop owner who rapes people, 100%. Yeah. It just kind of makes sense. You're like, yeah, they would have a sex slave living in the basement, because of course. And I just remember watching that when I was definitely way too young to watch this movie, and I was like, what is
Oh my God,
happening?
as a kid, that scene would be so over my head. I would be like, huh?
I was just like so incredibly confused.
I would think
Oh,
the
I
dude was like
remember
a
the guy's
luchador.
name. Okay, the guy's name was Maynard. I mean
Maynard, right?
Maynard. You know, Maynard
As
definitely
as
lives
a
in a
first
trailer and
name,
does meth.
eh.
If Maynard doesn't live in a trailer and does meth, then I
The
don't know
only thing I
anything
don't know is if he
about it.
owns a trailer. I mean, he definitely does meth, but it's what kind of property.
That's a good point. Let's see. My other thing in here was the soundtrack. I've probably listened to the soundtrack 20 more times than I've watched the movie. It's an incredible.
So
There's no original music. It's just songs.
it's that bass.
Tarantino.
Dum, 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 dum. Speaking of that, as a kid, Space Jam parodies Pulp Fiction briefly in The Big Game. Yosemite Sam and Elmer Fudd are Vincent and what's Samuel L. Jackson's character's name?
That's right. I
And
remember.
they play that song with
No. I remember. You're
Jules.
very right.
They're Vincent and Jules, and they play that song with the glasses, and they shoot out one of the monster's teeth. And as a kid, I remember my dad or my mom laughing, and I was like, I don't get it. And then now years later, you see Pulp Fiction, you're like, oh. What a
That's
weird
incredible.
reference to put in a kid's.
I definitely saw Space Jam, 15 times before I ever saw Pulp Fiction once,
Thing.
and I never made that connection. That's very good.
That's like a Shrek move where it's like just for the adults, clearly.
Yeah, for sure.
Kids don't know what the fuck.
But yeah, just the soundtrack, and obviously Tarantino has done that throughout his career. Like, of all of his movies that he's made, only one of them has an original score, and that's The Hateful Eight, which actually also won Best Original
I was
Score
gonna say
at the Oscars.
that's the one where the score where like they're setting up the ropes out in the snow in the beginning. I was like, holy fuck, Tarantino, we did not spare any expense on that.
Yeah, and the quick, not to digress too much, but he used like a guy who used to do like all the spaghetti westerns from like the 1970s.
He loves spaghetti westerns.
Oh,
That's
my
not
God,
a knock. I love that he
But
loves stuff so much.
The guy's like 98 years old, won the Oscar, and then like 3 years later was like, I don't understand that, Tarantino. I'm like, okay, bro. Why don't you go like, polish your Oscar statue and relax?
Just chill. Put that on the mantle.
And then just for my own personal impact, there's two things from this movie that I just say all the time. I say all the time, and if my wife was on this podcast, she would attest. Quote, man, I don't even have an opinion. All the time. That's obviously Marvin before he gets shot in the face.
Sure.
I say that all the time. Like, it just comes up in conversation. I don't even have
last words. Yeah, I would go out as a neutral party. That's how I want to.
And then also, this is some serious gourmet shit. I say that all the time. Obviously, Sam Jackson's character referring to Tarantino's character, coffee. And honestly, it's every time I'm at the grocery store and I'm like looking at the coffee aisle, I'm like, I'm gonna buy the expensive shit because
if you ground your beans at the grocery store or at home, it is serious gourmet shit.
Yeah, I ground my beans at home. So thank you, Fiction and Quentin Tarantino, for that.
And Alex, when you drink it, does your pinky just reflexively rebel itself away from the mug?
So hard it's almost broken several times. So yeah.
That's good stuff. All right, last one. This is an easy one for this. And now some of our reviews, this is up in the air, but rewatchability. Alex, do you think you'll ever rewatch Pulp Fiction again in your life?
So I have a daughter. She's 19 months, going on 20 months, and I'm trying to really figure out like what's the right age to show her this movie. Like, is it
20 months?
3 years old? 4 years old? I really want her to see some violent shit. No. Like I said, and
as soon as she likes milkshakes, I would say she's.
I've definitely sounded like way too much of a fanboy, but this is my favorite movie. Every time I rewatch this movie, it reinforces the fact that it's my favorite movie. I have a lot of favorite movies, but this one, if I could only watch one movie for the rest of my life, this would be it. And I've seen it more than any other movie. I've probably seen it 25, 30 times from start to finish. So yeah, is it rewatchable? I would say if you don't think this movie is rewatchable, then fuck you.
Then you're not still listening. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, right. By this point, you're like, okay, these guys are still talking about Pulp Fiction. I'm out.
I mean, as rewatchability goes, I think the great thing about most Tarantino movies is because he's such a movie fan, when you almost know where the narrative goes, you get more out of it because you're less focused on, all right, how are all these plot threads going to be tied up, and more into what's this sounds pretentious as fuck, but it's the minutia that he's so good at. The simple stuff with dialogue, the set dressing, the way people are dressed, like especially in a movie that's not told linearly, like. Right. There's probably so many Easter eggs in this movie that, like, even me as a comic book fan would be like orgasmic rewatching it. So
yeah. So one thing that's great, and I was gonna bring it up in story, but I think it makes more sense here, is like I love the made up brands.
Yes.
Like he's got Fruit Brute cereal made up. That's not a real cereal. He's got
sugar and fruit works.
Red Apple cigarettes, which actually keep coming up in a lot of his
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right?
Right. He's got Big Kahuna Burger, obviously made up. That's a Hawaiian burger joint. I hear they make some tasty burgers. I never had one myself. My girlfriend's a vegetarian, which pretty much makes me a vegetarian. I wasn't going to quote Sam Jackson, but here I go. A Big Jerry Cab Company. That's the cab company of the Esmeralda Villas Lobos that picks up.
Do we know the name of the diner that the bunny?
I don't think they ever show the name of the diner. No,
I don't think they do either. We don't ever see a menu or anything.
This is actually, so I want to transition real quick. I know this isn't a category, but I have a random notes section that because I love this movie so much. So, okay.
It's one of them.
The first scene is Sam Jackson and John Travolta's characters. It's morning. They establish the fact that it's
very early, like 7 a.m.
And they make fun of the fact that Brett is eating hamburgers for breakfast. Look at the big brains on Brett.
It is a weird move, yeah.
They're having hamburgers, not even cheeseburgers. You know, sometimes you can have cheese with breakfast, right? So it's kind of okay. You're going to have just beef.
Honestly, though, would Big Kahuna even serve them that then? Plot hole.
So they established the fact that it's very early in the morning, right? Because they're about to walk into the apartment building, and Travolta looks at his watch and is like, it's not time yet. So they walk back, right? And then once they are in the apartment, they're talking about breakfast, et cetera, et cetera. So if you think about the movie chronologically, after they survive the attempted, they're going to get murdered, and then the guy somehow misses a full chamber of shots. They survive, and
yeah, Vince that guy sucks.
Yeah, and not Vince, but
Jules.
Yeah, Jules just has this like, oh my God,
come to Jesus
moment, which is this whole hilarious thing in its own right. And the next steps they do is they take Marvin in the car. They accidentally shoot Marvin in the face. They end up at Jimmy's house, which is QT's character. And then Jules calls Marcellus, and Marcellus says, Jules, don't fucking worry about it. I got the wolf on it. And then we see Harvey Keitel for the first time, and he appears to be at some fucking function. I'm sorry.
It's a fundraiser.
What function are you at 9 a.m. in the morning? Even if I'm expanding this timeline as long as I possibly can, there's nobody dressed in like, straight up gowns and tuxedos at 9 a.m. in the morning. But again, I don't think it matters at all. It's just hilarious. It's part
Maybe
of
that's how he sleeps.
It's just
he's that fucking fancy.
He's wearing a full tuxedo with a bow tie, and he's like, let me leave this function and go help these gangsters out of removing a murdered head-exploding body out of the back of this car.
But that's Tarantino, dude. Costume designer's like, do you want us to change? He's like, no, just keep him in a fucking tuxedo. We'll figure it.
Yeah, like, it doesn't matter. And then, so I had that in there. I just think it's kind of part of it. I just think it's hilarious. Like, it doesn't really matter, right? So what if it's 9 a.m. in the morning and he's at a function? Who cares? The other thing I had in there was just that so Madonna is referenced heavily in the opening scene of Reservoir Dogs, and then is also referenced in Pulp Fiction because Butch's girlfriend says, "I want to have a potbelly like Madonna had in like I forget the specific song. It's one Madonna song that was very popular in the 80s."
Probably about sex. Yeah.
Another thing is that the person who plays Honey Bunny, aka Yolanda, so she's only referred to as Honey Bunny in the credits. She's Christopher Plummer's daughter, which I didn't know until I did prep for this podcast. I'm like,
wow,
what? Christopher Plummer? His daughter's in Pulp Fiction? That's incredible to me. And then just overall, I love that Jules and Vincent are in an apartment building. And when I watched this movie just now in preparation for this podcast, I watched it utilizing some like much better headphones. So I heard a lot of background noise that I've never heard before. And so when Jules and Vincent are walking through that apartment complex, there's incredible sounds coming out of every apartment they walk by. You can hear somebody, they're clearly like watching their morning news. Somebody's like listening to music, having their like breakfast cereal.
Oh, that's cool.
They're clearly just walking through a hallway, like hearing stuff. And we're supposed to believe that they like are in this, they go into this apartment and proceed to like unload a lot of bullets with no silencers, and then proceed to chill there for like 10-15 minutes and have a conversation about religion. And no
slow Tuesday in that apartment complex. Also, right. I have to say, just as a big Marvel fan, at the end of spoilers for Captain America Winter Soldier, just end the podcast if you haven't seen it, but Nick Fury supposedly dies at the end of that movie, and the Bible verse that they put on his tombstone is the Ezekiel verse that he references in Pulp Fiction.
That's amazing.
It's like,
I think there's no better line to end than that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, thank you guys for listening to us. We have been the Bro Force Squad podcast. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. If you just type in Bro Force Squad as 3 separate words, you'll find us. Follow us on Twitter at Bro Force Squad, and check out everything on our website, broforcesquad.com. Till next time, we'll see you at Jackrabbit Slims.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm the one that says bad motherfucker.
Catch up. That's the punchline.